The rain came down in sheets across Portland, Oregon, turning the morning streets into mirrors that reflected the gray October sky. Marcus Hale sat in his black Mercedes SUV, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the unremarkable Café across the street. The windshield wipers moved in rhythmic sweeps, clearing the water just long enough for him to read the hand-painted sign above the door. Sunrise Café. It wasn't the kind of place he usually frequented. Marcus was a man who preferred establishments where the staff knew his name, where a private booth was always available, where questions were never asked. But this morning his regular spot was closed for renovations, and his 3 sons were hungry, restless, and growing louder by the minute in the back seat. "Dad, I'm starving," Liam announced dramatically, his small voice carrying the weight of someone who hadn't eaten in days, rather than the 2 hours it had actually been since breakfast. "Me too," Noah chimed in, always quick to echo his brother. Ethan, the quietest of the 3, simply pressed his face against the window, watching the rain cascade down the glass with the focused intensity only a 5-year-old could muster. Marcus glanced at them through the rearview mirror, and despite the constant chaos they brought into his carefully controlled life, he felt the familiar warmth in his chest, his boys, his unexpected miracles. The 3 reasons he got up every morning and the 3 reasons he'd been trying to be a better man than he was. All right, Marcus said, his deep voice tinged with the exhaustion of single parenthood. "We'll make it quick, in and out." "Got it? Got it!" Liam and Noah shouted in unison. Marcus cut the engine and stepped out into the rain, immediately feeling the cold water seep through his expensive suit jacket. He opened the rear door and helped the boys out one by one, making sure their raincoats were properly zipped. Liam's hood fell back immediately, his dark hair getting soaked. "Liam, hood up," Marcus instructed, pulling it back over his son's head. "But I like the rain, Dad." "I know you do, buddy, but you'll like it less when you catch a cold." They hurried across the street, splashing through puddles that the boys seemed magnetically drawn to, despite Marcus's attempts to steer them around the water. By the time they reached the cafe's entrance, all 3 boys were giggling, their shoes squelching with each step. Marcus pushed open the door, a small bell chiming overhead to announce their arrival. The warmth hit him immediately, a welcome contrast to the October chill outside. The cafe was small, intimate, with exposed brick walls painted a soft cream color. Wooden tables with mismatched chairs were scattered throughout the space, most of them empty at this mid-morning hour. The aroma of fresh coffee and baking bread filled the air, mixing with something sweeter, cinnamon maybe or vanilla. Soft jazz played from a speaker somewhere, barely audible above the hiss of the espresso machine. A few customers sat scattered throughout the space, an elderly man reading a newspaper by the window, a young woman typing on a laptop in the corner, a couple sharing a pastry and speaking in low voices. It was peaceful, normal, the kind of place that existed in a world far removed from Marcus's usual reality. The boys immediately gravitated toward a table near the counter, shrugging off their wet raincoats and climbing into chairs. Marcus helped them settle, his mind already calculating how quickly they could eat and leave. He had a meeting at 11, another at 1, and, "I'll be right with you." The voice came from behind the counter, bright and apologetic, a voice that stopped Marcus's thoughts mid-sentence, a voice that reached into his chest and squeezed. He knew that voice. Marcus turned slowly, and time seemed to fracture into before and after. Emily. She stood behind the counter, her back to him, reaching up to grab a bag of coffee beans from a high shelf. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, shorter than he remembered. She wore a simple green apron over jeans and a white long-sleeve shirt. She was thinner than before, her movements carrying a careful efficiency that spoke of long hours and physical tiredness. But it was her. After 6 years of silence, 6 years of unanswered questions, 6 years of carefully constructed walls around the memory of her, it was Emily. Marcus felt his lungs forget how to work. She turned around, a customer's completed order in her hands, and her eyes met his. The smile that had been forming on her lips froze. The color drained from her face. For a moment, one suspended, crystalline moment, they were 23 again, standing in her college dorm room, when the world had been full of possibility, and neither of them knew how thoroughly it would all fall apart. The mug she was holding slipped slightly in her grip. She caught it, but coffee sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the counter. She didn't seem to notice. "Marcus," she whispered, so quietly, he almost didn't hear it over the jazz music. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. 6 years of practiced control, of maintaining composure in situations that would break most men, and he was undone by the sight of Emily Dawson in a cafe apron with flour dusting her forearm. "Dad?" Liam's voice cut through the moment. "Can we get hot chocolate?" The spell broke. Emily blinked, and suddenly she was moving, wiping up the spilled coffee with quick mechanical movements, her eyes carefully avoiding his. Marcus forced himself to breathe, to think, to remember where he was and who was watching. "Sure, buddy," Marcus managed, his voice rougher than usual. "Hot chocolate." He approached the counter slowly, each step feeling significant, loaded. Emily kept her eyes down, focused on the register screen with an intensity that suggested she was trying to disappear into it. "Hi, welcome to Sunrise," she said, her customer service voice too bright, too artificial. "What can I get for you?" Marcus stopped at the counter, his hands finding his pockets because he didn't trust what they might do otherwise. Up close, he could see the details 6 years had written into her face, faint lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a small scar on her left cheekbone, shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She was still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 3 hot chocolates, Marcus said carefully. "And coffee. Black." "Size?" Emily asked the register, not him. "Large." Her fingers moved across the screen, and he noticed they were trembling slightly. No ring on her left hand. No ring at all. "Anything else?" she asked. "Do you have—" He stopped. What was he doing? What could he possibly say? "What do you recommend?" Emily finally looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes was so raw, so immediate, that Marcus physically felt it. This wasn't the reunion he'd fantasized about during weak moments late at night. This wasn't anger or relief or even bittersweet nostalgia. This was devastation, barely contained. "The cinnamon rolls are fresh," she said quietly. "The boys might like them." She'd noticed them. Of course she'd noticed them. "We'll take 3, Marcus said. Emily nodded and turned away, moving to prepare their order. Marcus watched her hands shake as she reached for the cups, watched her pause and take a deep breath before continuing. He wanted to say something, anything, but what could possibly be adequate? "Sorry I haven't called in 6 years. Why did you disappear? I've thought about you every single day. Is that lady okay?" Noah's voice carried across the cafe. "She looks sad." Several customers glanced over. Emily's shoulders tensed. Marcus turned back to the table where his son sat watching the scene with the unnervingly perceptive eyes of children who'd learned to read emotions before they could read books. "She's fine," Marcus said, returning to the table. "Just busy." "But, Noah, not now." Ethan, who had been quietly observing everything, tilted his head. "Do you know her, Dad?" Marcus sat down, suddenly exhausted. "I used to. A long time ago." "How long?" "Before you were born." Liam's eyes widened with the wonder of someone who couldn't fathom a time before his own existence. "That is a long time." Marcus almost smiled despite everything. "Yeah, buddy. It is." They sat in silence, the boys sensing their father's strange mood and unusually restraining their normal energy. Marcus watched Emily move behind the counter, preparing their drinks with practiced efficiency. She'd always been capable, competent, the kind of person who made difficult things look effortless. He'd loved that about her. He'd loved everything about her. That was the problem. A few minutes later, Emily approached their table carrying a tray. She'd composed herself, her face now carefully neutral, professional. She set down the 3 hot chocolates in front of the boys, each topped with whipped cream and a sprinkle of chocolate shavings. "Careful, they're hot," she said softly. "Thank you," the boys chorused, and Marcus was grateful he'd drilled manners into them. Emily set his coffee down last, along with a small plate holding 3 massive cinnamon rolls that looked homemade and smelled incredible. She was careful not to let their hands touch. "Whoa," Liam breathed, staring at the cinnamon rolls. "These are huge." "They're my specialty," Emily said, and for just a moment, a real smile flickered across her face as she looked at the boys. "I hope you like them." "We will," Noah declared with absolute certainty. Emily's smile grew a fraction wider, reaching her eyes for just a second before fading. She finally looked at Marcus fully, and the weight of 6 years pressed down on the small space between them. "If you need anything else, just let me know," she said formally. "Emily," Marcus started, not knowing how he'd finish the sentence, but she was already walking away back to the safety of the counter, putting distance between them like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. Maybe his did too. Marcus watched her go, then forced himself to focus on his sons. They were already digging into the cinnamon rolls, getting icing on their faces and hands, chattering about something that happened at school yesterday. Normal life, simple joy, the things he'd built for them. But across the room, Emily stood with her back to them, her hands gripping the edge of the counter, her shoulders rigid with tension, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that nothing about his carefully constructed life was going to stay simple anymore. "Dad," Ethan said suddenly, his small voice cutting through Marcus's thoughts. "Why does that lady look like us?" Marcus's attention snapped to his youngest son. "What?" Ethan pointed at Emily with his cinnamon roll-covered finger. "Her nose. It's like ours. Pointy at the end." Noah leaned forward, squinting across the cafe. "Oh yeah, and her eyes. They're the same color as Liam's." Marcus felt ice water dump into his veins. "Boys, don't point, it's rude." But Liam was already studying Emily with the intense focus he usually reserved for his building blocks. "She's pretty," he announced. "And she smiles weird, like when you take our picture and tell us to say cheese but we don't want to." "That's enough," Marcus said more sharply than he intended. The boys fell silent, surprised by their father's tone. Marcus rarely raised his voice with them. He'd promised himself when they'd arrived in his life, 3 tiny, screaming miracles left on his doorstep with nothing but a note and a DNA test, that he would never be the kind of father who ruled through fear or anger. "Sorry," he said more gently. "Just eat your food, okay?" They nodded, returning to their breakfast, but Marcus could feel their curiosity radiating off them like heat. Kids always knew when adults were hiding something. They had a sixth sense for secrets. Marcus sipped his coffee, barely tasting it, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. Emily here. Emily working in a cafe in Portland. Emily who disappeared from his life 6 years ago without explanation, without warning, without a trace. He'd looked for her. God, he'd looked. Used every resource at his disposal. Called in favors. Hired investigators. Nothing. Emily Dawson had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. Her apartment abandoned. Her phone disconnected. Her job left with 2 weeks' notice and no forwarding information. Her family claimed they hadn't heard from her. Her friends knew nothing. After a year, his right-hand man, Vincent, had gently suggested Marcus stop looking. "Some people don't want to be found, boss," he'd said. Maybe she had her reasons. Marcus had finally, painfully, stopped searching, locked that part of his life away, focused on the business, on building his empire, on survival. And then one random Wednesday morning, 3 babies had appeared on his doorstep. The DNA test had confirmed they were his. The investigation turned up nothing. No mother identified, no paper trail, no answers. Just 3 sons who needed him, who looked at him with complete trust, who'd forced him to become a better man than he'd ever planned to be. He'd never connected it to Emily. She'd been gone for over a year by then. The possibility hadn't even occurred to him. But now, watching her move behind the counter, seeing what his sons had seen, the shape of her nose, the color of her eyes, the way she moved, Marcus felt the foundation of his understanding begin to crack. No, it wasn't possible, was it? "Excuse me, miss?" Liam called out suddenly, waving his hand in the air like he was in school. Emily turned, her professional smile back in place. "Yes, sweetheart. What's your name?" Marcus's heart stopped. Emily's smile faltered for just a moment. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Liam. "Emily," she said softly. "I'm Liam," his son announced proudly. "And this is Noah and Ethan. We're triplets. That means we were all born on the same day from the same mom, but we don't know who she is because Dad won't tell us." "Liam," Marcus said quietly, but the damage was done. Emily's face had gone pale again. Her hands, which had been resting on the counter, curled into fists. That's a beautiful thing," she managed. "Being triplets. You must be very special." "That's what Dad says," Noah added. "He says we're his miracles." "I bet you are," Emily whispered, and the emotion in her voice was unmistakable now. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the question forming, saw the hope and fear and desperate need to know warring in her expression. "How old are they?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the cafe's music. Marcus held her gaze. 5. They just turned 5 last month. The timeline. They both knew the timeline. 9 months back from 5 years ago would be September, Emily breathed. They were born in September. It wasn't a question. September 14th, Marcus confirmed, watching her face carefully. 10:30 in the morning. Well, Liam was. The other two came within minutes. Emily's hand went to her mouth. She took a step back from the counter, bumping into the espresso machine. The elderly man by the window looked up from his newspaper, concerned. "I need—" Emily started, then stopped. "Excuse me." She turned and disappeared through a door marked "Staff Only," leaving Marcus sitting at the table with 3 confused boys and a cafe full of questions he'd spent 5 years not asking. "Is she okay?" Ethan asked worriedly. "Did we say something wrong?" Marcus forced himself to smile reassuringly. "No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. I think Miss Emily just remembered something sad. Should we give her a hug?" Liam suggested. "You always say hugs make sad things better. The simplicity of children. The beautiful, heartbreaking simplicity of seeing the world as fixable, as kind, as full of solutions as easy as kindness and contact." "Maybe later," Marcus said, his mind still reeling. "Finish your breakfast." They ate in silence, the boys sensing something significant had happened even if they couldn't name it. Marcus drank his coffee without tasting it, his eyes fixed on that staff door, waiting. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, another woman emerged from the back, older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a bun. She approached their table with a concerned smile. "Hi there," she said warmly. "I'm Patricia, the owner." Emily had to step out for a moment. "Is everything okay with your order?" "Everything's fine," Marcus said, standing. "Is she all right?" Patricia's smile dimmed slightly. "She will be. She just needed some air." Her eyes moved to the boys, then back to Marcus. And there was knowledge there, the kind that came from years of observing human nature. "She hasn't taken a break in months, refuses to. This is the first time I've seen her show any emotion since I hired her a year ago." A year? Emily had been here, in Portland, for at least a year. 30 minutes from where Marcus lived with their— He stopped that thought. He didn't know anything for certain yet. "Can I pay?" Marcus asked, reaching for his wallet. "Already taken care of," Patricia said gently. "Emily said it's on the house. First-time customer discount." Marcus doubted that was an actual policy, but he didn't argue. He helped the boys into their raincoats, made sure they grabbed their mostly finished cinnamon rolls to take with them. As they walked toward the door, Liam pulled free from Marcus's hand and ran back to the counter. "Can you tell Miss Emily thank you?" he said to Patricia. "And that her cinnamon rolls are really good? And that she has a pretty smile?" Patricia's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "I absolutely will, sweetheart. And tell her—" Liam paused, thinking hard. "Tell her she doesn't have to be sad. Because my dad says everyone has sad things, but that's okay because tomorrow might be better." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Words he'd said to his sons during hard nights when they asked questions about their mother he couldn't answer, when they wondered why other kids had 2 parents and they only had one. His own childhood had taught him about disappointment and loneliness, and he'd sworn his boys would never feel that way, would always know they were loved, wanted, enough. Patricia knelt down to Liam's level. "That's very wise. I'll tell her exactly that." Liam beamed and ran back to Marcus, who took his hand firmly this time. They walked out into the rain, which had softened to a gentle drizzle. Marcus got the boys buckled into their car seats, then sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. His phone buzzed. Vincent, reminding him about the 11 o'clock meeting. Business, territory, money, the empire he'd built through careful planning and ruthless execution. The world he'd promised himself he'd keep separate from his sons. The reason he had people who handled the unpleasant necessities, while Marcus kept his hands clean enough to tuck his boys into bed at night. He should drive away, should go to his meeting, should let this moment be what it was, a strange coincidence, a ghost from his past who'd stirred up old feelings but ultimately meant nothing to his current life. But through the rain-streaked window, Marcus could see the side alley next to the cafe, and there, leaning against the brick wall with her face tilted up to the rain, was Emily. She was crying. Even from this distance, he could see her shoulders shaking, could see her hand pressed against her chest like she was trying to hold her heart inside her body. "Dad?" Noah's voice came from the back seat. "Why are we just sitting here?" Marcus made a decision that he knew with absolute certainty would change everything. "Just a minute, boys. I need to talk to Miss Emily." "About what?" "About 6 years of silence. About 3 boys with her eyes and his stubbornness and a birthday that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. About whatever had made her disappear and whatever had brought her here. About the truth, whatever it was, that had just shattered both of their carefully rebuilt lives." "About old times," Marcus said. opening his car door. He stepped out into the rain and walked toward the alley, each step feeling like he was moving toward either salvation or destruction. He didn't know which. He suspected it might be both. Emily didn't notice him approaching, lost in her grief. Up close, Marcus could see the tears mixing with rain on her face, could see the way her whole body trembled with the force of emotions she'd clearly been holding back. "Emily," he said quietly. She spun around, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. For a moment she looked like she might run. Then something in her expression hardened, solidified into something like determination or maybe just exhaustion. "What do you want, Marcus?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Haven't you done enough?" The accusation stung, but he pushed past it. "I haven't done anything. You're the one who disappeared. I had my reasons." "What reasons?" Marcus demanded, his own frustration rising. "What could possibly—" "Those boys," Emily interrupted, pointing toward his car where 3 small faces were pressed against the windows, watching with rapt attention. "Those boys are 5 years old." "Yes." "Born in September." "Yes." "Marcus," Emily whispered, and in that moment she looked broken. Were they born on the 14th? He could lie, could end this conversation right now, protect them both from whatever truth was hiding in the space between their words, could keep the life he'd built intact, simple, manageable. But when he looked at Emily, at the desperate hope and terror in her eyes, Marcus found he couldn't do it, couldn't add one more lie to whatever had already been done to both of them. "Yes," he said. "September 14th, 10:30 a.m. Liam was first, then Noah 30 seconds later. Ethan was the last, took his time, didn't cry at first and scared everyone half to death before finally screaming loud enough to wake the dead." Emily let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Her knees buckled and Marcus caught her automatically, his hands on her arms, holding her up. "That's not possible," she breathed. "That's not possible. They told me. The doctors, they said—" "What did they say?" Marcus asked urgently, his hands still holding her steady. "Emily, what happened?" She looked up at him, and the devastation in her eyes was total, complete. "I was pregnant, Marcus. 6 years ago I was pregnant with triplets, and they told me I lost them. They told me they were gone." The world tilted. Marcus heard the words, understood them individually, but together they formed something so impossible, so deliberately cruel, that his mind rebelled against accepting it. "You were pregnant," he repeated slowly, "with triplets." "Yes. Yes," Emily said again, more forcefully. "Who else's would they be? I disappeared because I found out I was pregnant, and I knew what your life was like, Marcus. I knew what you were involved in, what dangers came with being close to you. I couldn't bring babies into that world. So you just left?" The anger in Marcus's voice surprised him. "Without telling me? Without giving me a choice?" "What choice?" Emily shot back, finding her own anger now. "What choice, Marcus? Stay and watch our children grow up surrounded by danger? Stay and pretend it was normal, that it was safe? I was protecting them. By taking them away from me? They were never supposed to be," Emily shouted, then seemed to catch herself, lowering her voice even though it shook with emotion. "The doctors told me there were complications. They said I lost them at 19 weeks. They showed me ultrasounds, medical reports. I mourned them, Marcus. I grieved for 3 babies I never got to hold, never got to meet. And you're telling me," she broke off, looking past him toward the car where 3 boys watched with concerned faces. "You're telling me they're alive," she finished in a whisper, "that they've been alive this whole time." Marcus felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a truth so massive, so staggering, that acknowledging it would mean his entire understanding of the past 5 years had been built on lies. "I don't know what happened," he said carefully, his mind racing through implications, possibilities, dangers. "But those boys were left on my doorstep 5 years ago. No note, except one that said, 'These are yours.' DNA test confirmed it. I've been looking for their mother ever since, Emily. For 5 years I've been trying to find her." "You were looking for me," Emily said, the realization dawning. "All this time, you were looking for me, and I was—" She pressed her hands to her face. "Oh God. Oh God, Marcus, what happened? What did they do?" "I don't know," Marcus said grimly, his mind already moving into the calculating space where problems became puzzles and puzzles had solutions, usually involving finding who was responsible and making sure they understood the consequences of crossing him. "But I'm going to find out." Emily lowered her hands, and when she looked at him, Marcus saw the woman he'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, fierce, determined, strong. "I want to know them," she said. If they're my babies, Marcus, I want to know them." It was the easiest decision Marcus had ever made. "Then come meet your sons." They walked back to the car together, through rain that had softened to a mist, through air that felt charged with significance. Marcus opened the passenger door, and Emily climbed in, turning in her seat to face the back seat where 3 boys sat in stunned silence, sensing that something important was happening. "Boys," Marcus said, his voice gentler than Emily had ever heard it. "This is Miss Emily. She's someone very special. Someone I should have introduced you to a long time ago." Liam, always the bravest, spoke first. "Are you our mom?" The question hung in the air. Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time when she smiled, it was radiant, real, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her in 6 years. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I might be." And as 3 small voices erupted in questions and excitement, as Emily's hands reached out to touch faces she'd never thought she'd see, as Marcus watched the impossible begin to become possible, one thought crystallized in his mind with absolute clarity. Someone had stolen 5 years from all of them. Someone had separated mother from sons, had left 3 babies on a doorstep, had built walls of lies that should never have existed, and Marcus Hale had spent his entire adult life making sure people who hurt his family understood exactly what that mistake cost. This time would be no different. But first, he would watch his sons meet their mother, would give them this moment, this gift, this beginning of something that should never have been taken from them in the first place. The rain continued to fall on Portland, washing the streets clean, and in a Mercedes SUV parked outside a small cafe called Sunrise, a family started the long, complicated process of finding each other again. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse apartment in downtown Portland, watching shadows from passing cars slide across the white expanse above him. The clock on his nightstand read 3:47 a.m., the glowing numbers a mockery of the rest his body desperately needed but his mind refused to allow. Emily was alive. Emily was here. Emily was their mother. The words repeated in his mind like a mantra, each repetition making them more real and somehow less believable. 5 years. 5 years of raising 3 boys alone, of midnight fevers and school registration and teaching them to tie their shoes. 5 years of questions he couldn't answer. Where's our mom? Why doesn't she want us? Did we do something wrong? 5 years of lying to his sons, telling them their mother had reasons, that she loved them even though she couldn't be there, that it wasn't their fault. And all along Emily had been grieving children she thought were dead. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone had orchestrated the separation, had manipulated medical records, had taken 3 newborn babies and left them on his doorstep like a package. The rage that thought sparked was cold, calculating. Marcus had learned long ago that hot anger was useless. It made you sloppy, made you act instead of think. But cold anger, that could be sharpened, wielded, used with precision. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Vincent. Early meeting moved to 8 a.m. Contractor situation needs handling. Marcus sighed. Business never slept, even when he desperately needed to. He typed back a confirmation, then set the phone down and finally admitted that sleep wasn't coming. He got up, pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, and padded quietly down the hallway to check on the boys. Their room was at the end of the hall, decorated with planets and spaceships that glowed in the dark. 3 small beds lined the walls, each one containing a sleeping child. Liam slept sprawled across his mattress, one leg hanging off the edge, his blanket kicked to the floor. Noah curled in a tight ball, his favorite stuffed elephant clutched to his chest. Ethan slept on his back, perfectly still, his hands folded on his stomach like a tiny gentleman. 3 completely different personalities in identical bodies. Marcus's entire world. He picked up Liam's blanket and covered him gently, then stood in the doorway watching them breathe. They'd handled meeting Emily better than he'd expected. Excited, curious, full of questions, but not overwhelmed. They'd invited her to have dinner with them. Dad makes really good spaghetti, had shown her their school drawings, had competed for her attention with the shameless enthusiasm of 5-year-olds. Emily had cried through most of it, but they'd been happy tears, and the boys had seemed to understand that somehow. She'd touched their faces with gentle, reverent fingers as if confirming they were real. She'd listened to their stories with complete attention. She'd laughed at their jokes, And when it was time for her to leave, Patricia had called, worried when Emily didn't return to the cafe. The boys had made her promise to come back tomorrow. "I will," Emily had whispered, hugging each of them in turn. "I promise. I'll come back." Marcus closed their door quietly and moved to the kitchen. He started coffee, then stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Portland spread below him, lights twinkling in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably lying awake too, her world equally shattered. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize, but the message was clear. "We need to talk about your cafe visit. T. Thomas." Marcus's jaw tightened. Thomas Chen had been his right-hand man 6 years ago, the person he'd trusted most in his organization. Then Thomas had gotten ambitious, had started making moves Marcus couldn't ignore, and they'd parted ways. Not violently. Marcus had learned that letting people go peacefully was often smarter than making enemies, but definitively, that Thomas was reaching out now, the same day Marcus had found Emily, couldn't be coincidence. Marcus deleted the message without responding. Whatever game Thomas was playing, it would have to wait. Right now, Marcus had more important things to focus on. The next morning arrived with the chaos that 3 5-year-olds brought to any household. Liam couldn't find his favorite shirt, the one with the dinosaur "Dad, I need it." Noah spilled orange juice across the kitchen counter. Ethan sat at the table, calmly eating his cereal while his brothers created mayhem around him. "Liam, you wore the dinosaur shirt yesterday," Marcus said, pulling a blue shirt from the drawer. "It's in the laundry. Wear this one." "But it doesn't have a dinosaur. It has a rocket ship. That's cooler than a dinosaur." Liam considered this seriously. "Can we go to space?" "Not today, buddy." "Can Miss Emily come with us when we do?" Marcus paused in the act of wiping up orange juice. "You really liked her, huh?" "She's nice," Noah announced. "And she smells good, like cookies." "She said I have beautiful eyes," Liam added proudly. "And she said you all do too." Ethan looked up from his cereal. "Is she coming to see us today?" "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "Maybe. You should call her," Ethan suggested with the simple logic of a child. "That's what you do when you want to see someone. You call them." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. "Eat your breakfast, or we'll be late for school." The morning routine continued. Teeth brushing, shoe tying, backpack checking. Marcus loaded them into the SUV and drove to Riverside Elementary, a private school with excellent security and teachers who understood that some families required discretion. "Have a good day," he told each of them as they climbed out. "Listen to Ms. Anderson. Be kind. Love you, Dad," they chorused, and then they were gone, swallowed up by the stream of children heading into the building. Marcus sat in the parking lot for a moment watching them go. 5 years ago, he'd been a different man, harder, colder, focused solely on building his empire. Then 3 babies had arrived and everything had shifted. You couldn't hold a crying infant at 2 a.m. and stay hard. You couldn't teach a child to read and stay cold. You couldn't watch your sons learn to ride bikes and not feel your heart crack open with terrifying vulnerability. They'd saved him, he realized. Those 3 boys had saved him from becoming someone he would have hated, and Emily had given them to him, even if she hadn't meant to, even if she'd been robbed of the choice. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment. He didn't have Emily's number, didn't know where she lived, only knew she worked at Sunrise Café and that she'd promised his sons she'd come back. Marcus started the engine and drove toward the cafe. The morning rush was in full swing when Marcus walked through the door. Every table was occupied. The line at the counter stretched to the door, and 2 employees Marcus hadn't seen yesterday moved with practiced efficiency behind the counter. Emily stood at the espresso machine, her hair pulled back, her movements focused and quick. She looked tired, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from sleepless nights. But she was smiling at a customer, making small talk while she prepared their drink. Marcus joined the line, feeling strangely out of place in his tailored suit among the students and professionals in casual clothes. He watched Emily work, saw how she remembered regular customers' orders, how she had a kind word for everyone, how she moved through the space like she'd been there forever. This was her world now, this quiet, normal, safe world, and he was about to pull her back into his. When he finally reached the counter, Emily's professional smile faltered. "Marcus, I didn't expect—" "The boys asked about you this morning," he said quietly, aware of the customers behind him. "They want to know when you're coming back." Something in Emily's expression softened. "Already?" "They're 5. When they like someone, they commit." A real smile crossed her face, brief but genuine. I want to see them again too. I don't know how this works. I don't know what the rules are. There are no rules, Marcus said. We're making this up as we go. Your usual? Emily asked, and it took Marcus a moment to realize she meant his coffee order from yesterday. She'd remembered. Please. She moved to prepare it, and Marcus stepped aside to let the next customer order. He waited by the counter, watching Emily work, seeing the practiced competence that came from months of repetition. When she brought him his coffee, he had his business card ready. My number, he said, handing it to her. Call when you're off work. We need to talk. Really talk. Emily took the card, her fingers brushing his. I know we do. Marcus, I don't even know where to start. How do I explain to them that I thought they were dead? How do I explain that I left you? That I've been missing 5 years of their lives? You tell them the truth, Marcus said simply. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. And they want to know you, Emily. Everything else we'll figure out. She nodded, tucking the card into her apron pocket. Okay, I'll call. After my shift ends at 2. I'll be waiting. Marcus spent the rest of the morning in meetings that his mind was only half present for. Vincent sat across from him in the private office at Hale Construction, Marcus's legitimate business front that actually turned a healthy profit, talking about supply chain issues and contractor disputes, and Marcus heard maybe every third word. Boss, Vincent said finally, leaning back in his chair, you want to tell me what's going on? Because you've been somewhere else all morning. Marcus looked at his oldest friend, the man who'd stood beside him through everything, who'd helped him navigate single fatherhood with surprising grace. Vincent was in his early 40s, built like someone who'd spent time in the military with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I found her, Marcus said. Vincent's eyebrows rose. Found who? The boy's mother. The silence that followed was profound. Vincent leaned forward, his full attention now on Marcus. You're sure? She told me herself. She was pregnant 6 years ago, with triplets. She thought they died. Someone lied to her. It wasn't a question. Vincent understood their world, understood how easily people could be manipulated when the right pressure was applied. Someone orchestrated the whole thing, Marcus confirmed. Took our children and left them on my doorstep. Let her grieve for babies that were alive. Let me raise them without knowing who she was. Who would do that? Vincent asked, though his expression suggested he already had suspicions. I got a text last night. From Thomas. Vincent's face hardened. Of course. He always thought you were too soft, that the boys made you weak. This would be exactly his style. Cruel, calculated, designed to keep you isolated and dependent on the organization. He's going to regret it, Marcus said quietly, and Vincent had known him long enough to hear the promise in those words. What do you need from me? Information. I want to know everything about what happened 6 years ago. Medical records, adoption agencies, anyone who might have been involved. And I want to know what Thomas is up to now. Why he's reaching out. Vincent nodded. I'll start digging. What about Emily? Does she know what you do? Marcus leaned back in his chair. She knew 6 years ago. That's part of why she left. She didn't want to raise children in this world. Can't say I blame her, Vincent said. This life isn't for everyone. Isn't really for anyone with sense, if we're being honest. Marcus smiled grimly. No, it's not. So what are you going to do? You can't exactly introduce her to the boys and then disappear for days handling business. They'll notice. She'll notice. It was the question Marcus had been avoiding all morning. His work required flexibility, discretion, sometimes extended absences. It required being able to handle situations that couldn't be discussed over dinner. It required maintaining a carefully constructed wall between his personal life and his professional one. But Emily's return had cracked that wall, and Marcus had 3 sons who deserved better than a father, who was only half present, who disappeared without explanation, who lived in shadows. I don't know yet, he admitted, but something has to change. Vincent studied him for a long moment. You're thinking about walking away. I'm thinking about a lot of things. It's not that easy. You know it's not. We have obligations, commitments. People depend on the organization for their livelihoods. Territory we've negotiated. Agreements in place. I know, Marcus said. I'm not naive enough to think I can just walk away clean. But Vincent, I spent 5 years building something good for those boys. Something stable and safe. And now their mother is back and she left specifically to protect them from this life. What kind of man would I be if I didn't at least try to give them what she wanted? A practical one. Vincent said, but there was no judgment in his voice. But I understand. I'll support whatever you decide, boss. You know that. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Emily. The boys are beautiful. Thank you for sharing them with me yesterday. Something in Marcus's chest loosened. He typed back, they're yours. You don't have to thank me for that. A pause then. Can I see them again tonight? Maybe take them for ice cream? If that's okay? Marcus smiled at his phone, and Vincent raised an eyebrow. That her? Yeah. She wants to take the boys for ice cream. That's good. That's normal. Kids like ice cream. Kids love ice cream, Marcus corrected, already typing a response. They'd love that. I'll pick you up at 5. I can meet you there. Emily, let me pick you up, please. Another pause. Okay, I'm at 2847 Morrison Street, apartment 3B. Marcus memorized the address, then stood. Meeting's over. I've got somewhere to be. Vincent grinned. Never thought I'd see the day Marcus Hale got nervous over a woman. I'm not nervous. Boss, you're pacing. You never pace. Marcus forced himself to stop moving. This matters, Vince. This matters more than anything. I know it does, Vincent said, his voice gentler. That's why you'll figure it out, you always do. At 4:30 p.m., Marcus picked up the boys from school. They were full of energy, talking over each other about their day. Liam had won a gold star in math. Noah had made a new friend. Ethan had read a whole book by himself. That's great, buddy, Marcus said to each accomplishment, genuinely proud. Are we going home? Liam asked as Marcus drove past their usual turn. We're going to pick up Miss Emily. She wants to take you all for ice cream. The explosion of excitement in the back seat was immediate and deafening. Marcus smiled despite himself, their joy infectious. Is she our mom yet? Noah asked. Marcus carefully navigated the question. She's your mother, yes? But being someone's mom is more than just biology. It's about being there, about caring for you, about loving you. That takes time to build. But you said she is our mom, Liam pointed out with the relentless logic of a 5-year-old. She is, biologically. But the relationship part, that's what we're building now. Can we call her mom? Ethan asked quietly. Marcus met his eyes in the rearview mirror. I think you should ask her that. It's her decision too. They pulled up to an older apartment building in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Not unsafe, but definitely not where Marcus had imagined Emily living. The building needed paint. The steps were cracked, and the security door hung slightly crooked. Stay in the car, Marcus instructed. I'll be right back. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor and found apartment 3B. Before he could knock, the door opened. Emily stood there in jeans and a green sweater, her hair down for the first time since he'd seen her again, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous and hopeful all at once. Hi, she said softly. Hi, Marcus replied, suddenly feeling like he was 22 again, picking her up for their first date. You ready? I think so. I mean, it's just ice cream, right? How complicated can ice cream be? With 3 5-year-olds, very. Emily laughed, and the sound went straight to Marcus's heart. He'd missed that laugh, had missed it more than he'd let himself admit. They walked down to the car together, and the moment the boys saw Emily, they erupted in greetings. She climbed into the passenger seat, twisting around to face them, and they immediately began talking at her, all 3 at once competing for her attention. One at a time, Marcus said. Miss Emily can't hear you if you're all talking. They took turns after that, each telling Emily about their day, showing her papers from school, asking her questions. She listened to everything with complete attention, asked follow-up questions, praised their accomplishments. Marcus drove to a local ice cream shop watching this unfold, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The ice cream shop was crowded with after-school kids, but they found a table by the window. Marcus sat back and watched as Emily helped the boys choose flavors, negotiated napkin distribution, and laughed when Liam got chocolate ice cream on his nose within the first bite. You're a natural, Marcus said quietly. Emily met his eyes. I've thought about this for 5 years. What they'd look like, what they'd sound like, what kind of people they'd be. I imagined it so many times, and yet somehow the reality is better. They're amazing kids, Marcus agreed. Smart, kind, funny. They're the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you, Emily said, and her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for taking care of them, for loving them, for being the parent I couldn't be. Emily, you didn't choose. I know intellectually that it wasn't my fault. But I still left, Marcus. I still chose to disappear. If I'd stayed, if I'd trusted you, someone would have found another way. Marcus interrupted. This was deliberate, planned. If you'd stayed, they might have taken the boys anyway, or hurt you to get to me. Maybe you leaving saved all of you. Emily wiped at her eyes. Is that true? Or are you just being kind? I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I'm choosing to believe it because the alternative doesn't help anyone. Boys? Emily called, and they looked up from their ice cream. Can I ask you something? They nodded eagerly. Would it be okay if I spent more time with you? Like, maybe came to visit sometimes, or took you to the park, or had dinner together? Yes, Liam shouted immediately. Can you come to our school? Noah asked. For show and tell? Ethan's question was quieter, more careful. Are you going to leave again? The table fell silent. Emily's face crumpled slightly before she composed herself. She reached across the table and took Ethan's small hand in hers. No, sweetheart, I'm not going to leave. I left before because I thought I had reasons that seemed good at the time. But I'm here now, and I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. I promise I'll always tell you the truth, and I promise I'll do my best to be here for you. Do you promise? Promise? Ethan pressed. Not just regular promise? Promise, promise, Emily said solemnly. Cross my heart. That seemed to satisfy him. He nodded and returned to his ice cream. Marcus felt his phone buzz and glanced at it discreetly. A text from Vincent. Found something. You need to see this. Not urgent, but soon. He put the phone away. Whatever Vincent had found could wait. Right now he was watching his sons get to know their mother, was watching Emily's face light up with joy every time they laughed, was seeing the beginning of something he'd thought was impossible. For the first time in 6 years, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future that included all of them, together. But in the back of his mind, Thomas's message lingered like a threat. We need to talk about your cafe visit. Someone had stolen 5 years from them. Someone had orchestrated a cruel separation. Someone had played with their lives like they were pieces on a chessboard, and Marcus was going to find out who and why and make absolutely certain they understood the cost of what they'd done. But tonight was for ice cream, for laughter, for 3 boys and the mother they thought they'd never meet. Tonight was for beginnings. Tomorrow could be for answers. Marcus stared at the manila folder on his desk, its contents confirming his worst fears. Vincent sat across from him, waiting for a reaction. The medical records were falsified, Marcus said quietly. All of them. Vincent nodded. Fake ultrasounds, fabricated doctor's notes, even forged discharge papers. But I found the real hospital, St. Mary's. 3 healthy boys born September 14th via C-section. Mother listed as Jane Doe. The babies stayed in NICU for 3 days, then disappeared from the system. Disappeared, Marcus repeated, the word tasting bitter. No discharge records, no transfer papers. They vanished. Then 2 months later, they showed up on your doorstep. Marcus's hands clenched. Someone kept my sons for 2 months before giving them to me. This took serious resources, boss. Medical access, legal connections, planning. This points to Thomas, Marcus finished. It has to be Thomas. Vincent leaned forward. 6 years ago, you were talking about stepping back from operations. You'd met Emily, were getting serious. Thomas saw it as weakness. He needed you focused, controllable. So he destroyed my relationship and manipulated the birth of my children to keep me in line. The cold fury in Marcus's voice was controlled but absolute. What do you want to do? First, I tell Emily. She deserves to know what we found. That evening, Marcus picked up Emily after putting the boys to bed with Mrs. Chen. They drove to a quiet park overlooking the river, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. Marcus handed her the folder. Vincent found these. Your medical records from 6 years ago, they were all falsified. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it, scanning the documents. Her face went pale. These ultrasounds, the doctor's notes saying I lost them. None of this was real. We found the actual hospital, St. Mary's. You had an emergency C-section, 3 healthy boys. They were in NICU for 3 days before someone took them. Emily's hand went to her stomach, to the scar she'd never understood. I remember the surgery, the lights, the pain, but they told me there was nothing to save. Her voice broke. They told me my babies were gone. Someone wanted us separated. Marcus said gently. Someone with resources and connections orchestrated all of this. Why? Emily whispered. What kind of person does something so cruel? Marcus explained about Thomas, about the timing, about the theory that keeping Marcus isolated and focused was the goal. Emily stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. This is about your work, about that world I was trying to protect them from. Yes, Marcus admitted. I think Thomas saw you as a threat to his control over me. When you got pregnant, he saw an opportunity to remove you from the picture while still giving me the children, but without you to distract me. He took 5 years from me, Emily said, tears streaming down her face. 5 years of their lives. First steps, first words, bedtime stories, everything. Marcus moved to her side. I know, and I'm going to make sure he can never hurt this family again. But Emily, I need you to trust me to handle this carefully. Thomas is dangerous. Emily turned to him. I don't want the boys growing up in that world, Marcus. That's why I left. I know, Marcus said, taking her hand. And you were right to be scared. I've tried to keep them separate from it, but you're right. It's always there, underneath everything. They sat on a bench and Emily leaned against his shoulder. I got the DNA results today, she said after a long silence. And? They're mine. Officially, legally mine. I have 3 sons. She began to cry, deep, releasing sobs that shook her whole body. Marcus held her while she grieved for the lost years, for the manipulation, for everything stolen from them. When the tears finally subsided, Emily pulled back. The boys keep asking me questions I don't know how to answer, she said. Ethan asked if it was his fault I left. What did you tell him? The truth, that I thought they had died, that I didn't know they were alive, that I would have been there if I'd known, that it was grown-up problems, not anything to do with how wonderful they are. Marcus squeezed her hand. That was the right thing to say. Liam told me yesterday doesn't matter as much as tomorrow, Emily said with a small smile. He's wise beyond his years. Emily looked at Marcus fully. What happens now? With us? We take it one day at a time, Marcus said. We focus on the boys, on building trust, on figuring out how to be a family. The rest we'll handle together. Together, Emily repeated. I like that. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, perfect for the boys' soccer game. Marcus woke to 3 excited children bouncing on his bed. Dad, wake up. Mom's coming to watch us play, Liam announced. Marcus noticed they called Emily Mom now without hesitation. It had happened naturally over the past week, and the joy it brought to Emily's face each time was unmistakable. At the soccer field, Emily arrived carrying a cooler bag, wearing jeans and a blue sweater that matched the boys' jerseys. Mom! The boys shouted, running to her. Emily crouched and hugged all 3 at once, laughing. I brought orange slices and cookies for after the game. You made cookies? Liam's eyes widened. Chocolate chip, your favorite. Marcus set up chairs on the sideline, and Emily sat beside him as the game started. They watched Liam chase the ball aggressively. Noah positioned himself strategically, and Ethan observed more than play. They're so different, Emily said, laughing. Once you know them, it's obvious, Marcus replied. Liam is all energy. Noah is the planner. Ethan processes everything internally first. Emily's hand found his, their fingers lacing together naturally. They sat like that, watching their sons play under the clear October sky. When the game ended, the boys ran over for orange slices, sweaty and happy. You were amazing, Emily told each of them. Did you see my goal? Liam asked. I did. It was perfect. Other parents introduced themselves to Emily, assuming she was Marcus's wife. Neither corrected them. It was easier, and besides, Marcus wasn't entirely sure what they were yet, just that they were trying to build something real. As they packed up, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. Problem. Thomas knows Emily is back. Wants to meet tonight. Marcus's stomach tightened. He glanced at Emily, laughing with the boys, completely unaware that the danger he'd been trying to protect her from had just moved closer. He typed back, set it up. But we do this my way. Understood, boss. Marcus put his phone away and walked over to his family. Who wants pizza for lunch? The boys cheered. Emily looked up at him, her expression peaceful and content. Pizza sounds perfect, she said, standing and taking his hand. As they walked toward the parking lot, 3 boys running ahead, Emily beside him, Marcus made a silent promise. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, he would protect this family. This time, no one would take them away. The confrontation with Thomas was coming. The truth about what happened 6 years ago would finally be revealed. But right now, in this moment, Marcus had everything that mattered, and he would fight to keep it. The meeting with Thomas took place in a quiet restaurant. Neutral territory. Marcus sat across from the man who had once been his closest ally, now revealed as the architect of 6 years of pain. You wanted to talk, Marcus said calmly. Thomas leaned back, studying him. I heard Emily's back, the boy's mother. Quite a reunion. You knew she was their mother all along. I did what was necessary, Thomas said without remorse. You were getting soft, Marcus. Distracted. I kept your focus where it needed to be. Marcus felt the anger rise but controlled it. You manipulated medical records, separated a mother from her children, kept 3 infants hidden for months, and gave them to you, gave you a reason to stay strong, stay focused on business. That's over now, Marcus said firmly. I'm done with this life, Thomas. I'm walking away. Thomas's expression hardened. You can't just walk away. Watch me. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Vincent has documented everything you did. The falsified records, the hospital contacts, all of it. I could take this to the authorities, or you could let me go peacefully and we both move on. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Thomas nodded slowly. You've changed. I became a father, Marcus said simply. That changes everything. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of their new home in Eugene, watching Emily help the boys plant a vegetable garden. The house was modest but comfortable, a real home, not a fortress. He'd successfully transitioned out of the organization, settling old business and transferring operations to others. It hadn't been easy, but it was done. Now he ran the legitimate construction company full-time, worked normal hours, came home for family dinners. Emily had opened a small bookstore cafe downtown, combining her 2 passions. The boys helped on weekends, organizing books and greeting customers. Dad, come help us, Liam called, dirt smudged on his face. Marcus joined them, kneeling beside Ethan. What are we planting? Tomatoes, Ethan said seriously. Mom says they'll be ready in summer. Mom knows a lot about gardens, Marcus said, meeting Emily's eyes over the boys' heads. She smiled, that real, radiant smile that still made his heart skip. They'd been taking things slowly, rebuilding trust, learning each other again. Some nights they talked until dawn. Other times, comfortable silence was enough. Are you and Mom going to get married? Liam asked suddenly. Marcus and Emily exchanged looks, surprised but not uncomfortable. Maybe someday, buddy, Marcus said carefully. We're figuring things out together. The important part is we're all here now, Emily added, reaching across to squeeze Marcus's hand. We're a family. Promise you'll stay together? Noah asked. Promise, promise, Emily said, using their special phrase. Cross my heart. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Marcus and Emily sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the yard. Thank you, Emily said softly. For what? For giving up that life, for choosing us. Marcus pulled her close. You gave me something to choose. Something worth everything. The past couldn't be changed. 5 years had been stolen from them. But sitting here, with 3 beautiful boys sleeping inside, and Emily beside him, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not for a perfect life, they'd never have that, but for a real one, an honest one. A life built on truth and love and second chances. I love you, he said quietly. Emily looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. I love you too. I never stopped. In the distance, a car passed. A neighbor's dog barked. Life continued ordinary and beautiful in theirs. Finally, completely theirs.